What's going on, Attorney Barrow? Welcome to the show.
Hello, hello. Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's start at the beginning, man. I want to know what exactly made you want to become a lawyer?
Fun story. My family comes from Haiti. And growing up, I always heard stories about how my grandfather served as a judge in Haiti, handling family matters back in our hometown, or my family's hometown. And so that really inspired my push to my initial interest in the law. And what's lovely is, growing up here in Port St. Lucie, going to St. Lucie West Centennial High School, we had a criminal justice academy. And that really exposed me not only to the law, but to my first, real life, American attorney in one of my teachers there. And, that not only was that just essentially confirmed the fact that, hey, this is not only something that I would love to get my feet wet into, but really I find it interesting, right? And so from there, it's just been a journey into the law and growing my knowledge.
Now, speaking of knowledge, you are a purveyor of knowledge, and you went on to not just go to law school at Barry, but then also Boston University to get your LLM in taxation. You've worked at several law firms, you've taught at different universities, and now you run a multi-state practice. So what actually pushed you, man? I imagine someone with your resume could have went into any of the big four. So what made you actually start Barrow Legal?
So I had the privilege of getting to work alongside some brilliant attorneys, learning, truly honing my craft. But it came to a point where I realized, perhaps there's a different way that we can do things, right? Perhaps we can bring a more modern push to the law and how we handle our client matters. So when I was presented with the opportunity to open up the firm, I took it as a step to one, carve out that type of firm that I always wanted to see, and two, with the understanding that I had the ability now and the flexibility to pursue other avenues as well, such as teaching. Right, it really did open up my schedule to be able to do multiple things.
And then, so of all the practice areas, you said you had a criminal defense clinic in high school. You got an LLM and tax. So how did you end up picking estate planning to be the thing that you planted the flag around?
So it's interesting because it was early on in my career as an attorney that I realized this was something the area of law I wanted to be in. So one of the very, very first consultations I handled as a new attorney was a family. They came to me with the facts surrounding their grandmother's passing, and their concern was her home, naturally. And so, in doing my research on the home, pulling the title, come to find out the grandmother was not the owner of the property. In fact, it was their ancestor, the original owner of the property back in 1929, was still on title to the property. And so that sparked my interest in the sense that, no family should have that surprise, right? We should now have to go backtrack and do generations worth of probates, so that they can take ownership of a piece of property. And so being able to arm a family to set up the next generations in that way is invaluable, at least to me.
So, it's a theme. Hey, I've talked to you a lot. You know, you actually just dropped a video recently that I saw about your journey and your pathway and kind of your vision for your role on the Florida Bar Young Lawyer Division Board of Governors. And the thing that stuck out to me is that you talked about legacy. And in private conversations, she talked about generational wealth. So tell the audience exactly what is preserving generational wealth from your vantage point. Like, what does that term mean to you personally? And why is it such a big deal to you and your brand.
Absolutely. Well, I think we need to start with an understanding, which I'm sure you and, many other people would understand. We work hard for what we build during our lifetimes, right? And then the question then becomes, well, what happens if we're no longer here? And the beauty of our legal system is that we have the choice, right? And if we don't make a plan, the government will have a plan for us. And are we satisfied with that plan? And so, not only can you make sure that the right people are inheriting your assets, but you could set it up in a way that's in the most cost-effective way for them to inherit. You could set up in a way to make sure that not only your children are reaping the benefits of what you sowed, but their children and even your great grandchildren from there, right? So this is something that um, you know many other families, many other demographics of people, if I may, they've taken advantage of this over generations, and they're able to see the fruits of that labor years and years down the line. And there's certainly no reason why all of us can't take advantage of that, not just the wealthy.
Okay, I like that. So let's go right into teaching then. So what would be, I don't know, what's your number one thing if you had to instruct all of us listening today about, preserving generational wealth? What's the number one thing that we should do?
Well, the if I had to bring it down to a very, very basic level, I'd probably say plan, right? Make sure you have a plan in place, and don't be bogged down by um, preconceived notions you may have. But most importantly, in that planning process, be open to being educated, right? There's a lot of misinformation out there, a lot of presumptions that we have, but it may not be accurate, right? So definitely be open to planning and being open to learning what the actual strategies that might be a good fit for you are.
Well, let's dig a little deeper because I think planning is something that we we all conceptually do, right? Like I think we all know, okay, I want to be buried in this city, right? Or maybe even more specific, or this is the kind of burial I want, or I want to be cremated, whatever. I feel like we plan that stuff theoretically. We talk about it. We say it to the people that you know will be still there once we're deceased. But what does it mean to actually plan from your perspective in terms of actually getting something that's binding?
Well, whenever I talk with a new client, my main goal is to talk about the end goal in the beginning, right? And so basically I try to get an idea from my clients, well, who do you want to be in charge of everything? Where do you want to see everything go? Do you want to put conditions on any particular gifts? And not only that, making it understandable that we're not just talking in estate planning about what happens to our stuff, right? That's a very important piece, but we need to talk also about us as people, right? Who's going to step in and make decisions for me when I can't do it, right? And so, um, keeping the end goal in mind, then I can kind of build out from there my recommendations on how we can accomplish those goals, whether that be through trust based planning or whether that be through a will based plan, right? And taking advantage of all of the different laws in the different jurisdictions that may be of benefit to you.
But one thing that's huge in the African American community, and I imagine in a multitude of other communities, is this concept of godfather and godmother. And it's one of those things where you're going before God and you're saying, hey, should anything ever happen to me and my spouse, or me and the child's other parent, then we would want these people to step in, and be charged with kind of guiding our the child, in perpetuity, right?
Hmm.
What is it that a person needs to do in order to make that kind of stuff binding and effectuate those intentions?
Absolutely. And so it become very, very important to get these documented, whether that be through your will, or whether that be through, some jurisdictions allow you to have power of attorney or provide a power of attorney for over your child. Um, but whatever avenue you do take, it's very important that it is documented properly, signed, notarized, what have you. Um, because you bring up a very good point, right? We do these things, maybe spiritually, within the family, within the community, but unless we get it properly documented in those ways that I was mentioning, that may not be recognized in the law. And then unfortunately, you run into a situation where now you have loved ones bickering over who's going to take care of this child, taking it to court, and perhaps the person that the court chooses may not necessarily be the person you had in mind.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I was saying about the Godfather stuff from a cultural perspective. Now, you're first generation Haitian American. So how has your background influenced the way you approach the law? You talk about your grandfather a lot. So I'm curious how that has affected, how you approach the law and how you approach people.
The beautiful thing about Haitians as a culture, as a people, are very, very hardworking, diligent people, and I think that's rubbed off on me as I went into my career. Um, but it really does highlight to me very significantly, I must say, the importance of generational wealth, simply because um, I'm sure any of your Haitian listeners would be familiar with stories about families fighting over territory, over land, um, bickering over, inheritance. A lot of these things which could be avoided if we had proper planning in place, whether that was here or over abroad, um, overseas rather. So I think just culturally, it has resonated with me, but also as a culture too, I think I keep the mindset, and I think it's great to be able to communicate with clients on this point. It comes with a stigma, this planning, right? Maybe a little superstition surrounding it. If I put it on paper, am I now, um, you know, calling forth my own demise, right? So being able to educate and let people understand, what are the ramifications of us not planning. I think that's really come through from my background.
I'm not gonna lie, man. When I decided to bring you on and talk about estate planning, I went ahead and knocked on some wood, just in case. Like, yeah, just in case. But you know what though? That brings up a really good point, man, because you're in such a highly technical field as it relates to tax and estate laws, but you're also dealing with something that's deeply emotional and deeply personal. So I'm just curious, how do you balance the technical aspects of being a good lawyer as it relates to tax preparation and estate planning with also being a decent human, and trying to be there for people while they're talking about, their what will ultimately be one of their family's saddest days.
It's interesting you asked that. I always tell people if I had not gone into law, what I would have wanted to do truly was become a therapist, right? I love listening to people. I love helping people, counseling people through certain situations. And so naturally, I think I gravitate towards this area of law simply because, um, you know, I'm happy to allow my clients to unburden themselves, right? But I think it's very important for us to remember, hey, we're human first, right? Above all this, above the law, above taxes, all above, probate and estate planning, we are people, right? And especially with what I deal with, perhaps a client may have a deep sentimental attachment to, let's say, a painting, right? And it may not be. a Renoir. It may not be, the most expensive painting in the world, but it's important for us to understand, hey, there's an emotional tie to this. And this is why we're going through, hundreds of pages of documents just to make sure that this thing is taken care of, right? So really, we gotta lead with being people first. We gotta lead with being human first. And as much as I can put myself in my client's shoes as I can, I think that makes us better at the end of the day.
You talk about leading and leading off as people, um, and you have to lead as a leader of people. So I'm curious about your role on the YLD. And I want you to kind of go ahead and explain, because I don't know if everyone got a chance to see your video where you talk about legacy and the things you want to set up for young lawyers. So I know that there's a huge intersection between your work as a YLD governor, um, and what you're trying to accomplish as a law firm owner. So I want to give you the floor to touch on that a little bit.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, what makes me happiest about the YLD is because I came into the law as first generation here in America, so I didn't necessarily have the type of foundation or bonds that perhaps other folks may have coming into the law. And so, what makes me very excited about this role is being able to outreach to the different lawyers, young lawyers throughout Florida, and being able to produce resources for them and being a resource to them. And so I find that here in particular, I represent the 19th Judicial Circuit. We have a unique set of young lawyers in that we're spread across four different counties, and perhaps we may be familiar with our local bar associations, but being invited to reach out to the other bar associations outside of our particular counties, I think that's a situation or a place where um, um, of growth and true benefit to our young lawyers here. So being able to just help the next generation of attorneys just grow and become comfortable in their skin as practitioners, it's invaluable. And I truly am grateful for this position that I have.
Thanks, man. I love to hear it. I had a stint on the Young Lawyer Division Board of Governors myself and truly found it enlightening what I could accomplish, not necessarily inside of the board, but outside of the board, and similar to what you were saying. Now, I'm curious. I want to go back to the launching of your firm because then you mentioned working and getting a chance to work alongside some brilliant attorneys, but at some point you said this could be done differently, which you didn't say it, so I'll say it for you. I imagine what you were really saying is this could be done better, whether it's more efficient or if it's just at a higher level. So I'm curious, like, what kind of innovation have you brought to estate planning for your clients? Because scaling, not just in Florida and multiple cities in Florida, I might add, but scaling across different states, that's a lot. So I'm curious about the innovations that you're bringing to the law and to estate planning that makes it all possible.
Yes, yes. So building upon, the great work that I did with the other firms that I worked with throughout my career, definitely I'd say that my firm brings to the table the use of technology, right? So we maximize the use of technology, not just for maximizing our efficiency, but also building the best experience for our clients as possible, right? So having a client portal dedicated to our clients where they can have a secure line of communication directly to me and my staff, um, a secure place for us to exchange documentation, whether that's uploading drafts for us to review together or them uploading documents for my review and consideration. So that's just one of the ways that we're making sure we're taking advantage of all of the resources we have out here to make sure that we're educating as much as possible and communicating as much as we can. I think that that's my best way of making sure we're staying human first, right? Making sure we have that open line of communication. And I think that's what the firm does well.
Okay, I like it. So I know the hard stuff, like the hardest part for any of us that are running our own law firms, outside of like the natural aspects of trying to juggle and be good at so many different things, most of the time being things that are just completely opposite from one another, right? Like so, being technical and then being personable. So I am curious. You have to deal with a lot of people getting in the door, right? And like we talked about earlier, culturally speaking, there are a lot of misconceptions about estate planning, particularly the one, am I bringing on my own demise by talking about my death or talking about really the life after my death, and how I want to help everyone else. So like, what are the biggest misconceptions that people have about estate planning and how do you help your clients kind of shift that perspective?
Well, one of the biggest things that folks find hard to believe is they think you need to have a certain level of wealth to have an estate plan, right? Oh, it's only rich people that worry about these things, but that's not true, right? Um, so take it. I talk with folks all the time where their biggest asset is their home, right? Which is certainly nothing to gawk at. But because they think, oh, it's just this, 3 bedroom, 2 bathroom house, I don't have an estate. Well, of course you do, right? If you have a penny to your name, that is your estate, right? So I think it's very important for us to understand that it's not, you know, people who are allowed to plan for their estate. It's not people who have millions of dollars. It's regular run of the mill people. As long as you have one thing that you care about that you want to transfer from you to someone else, it's enough, right? As long as you care about how your care is going to be managed, who's going to be making decisions for you if you can't do it, then that is enough for you to step in and step up and start making a plan for yourself.
Wow, step in and step up. All right. So legacy is something that you and I have talked about before. It seems to continually be a theme in the speeches that you're giving. It's a theme in your work. So I am just kind of curious, like, what kind of legacy do you want to leave, both professionally and personally?
Well, professionally, personally, I want to leave a legacy of knowledge, right? I want to make sure that everything I do resonates with people, touches on folks. And if I can't leave a body of work for maybe the next generation to look back upon and grow from, perhaps I can touch the next generation of attorneys, next generation of paralegals, so that they can take what they learned from me and teach the masses going forward. So definitely, if I had it my way, a legacy of knowledge.
Okay, I like that. And so, what are the ways that you give out that knowledge? I happen to know, and I think I talked about this in your intro, that you have authored a book. Rumor is you're working on a second one. I'll let you talk about that if you want in your close. But so like, what are the other ways that you are giving out knowledge? Like, what? How can people learn more about estate planning from you?
Well, definitely have put out, published my first book, Peace of Mind, Piece by Piece, Crafting Your Estate Plan. And really that gives it does take the opportunity to dispel a lot of common myths as they relate to estate planning. But other than that, I do have the pleasure of getting to serve as an adjunct professor teaching trust and estates to paralegal students. And being able to develop my own course and teach that in a 16-week course has been invaluable, right? But as you said, yes, I am working on additional materials, law review articles, books for publication, so that I can spread out that information as far as I can.
And that's fantastic, man. Hey, I appreciate you being on the show. One of the things that I love to do is allow for my guests to have the floor and allow them to be able to discuss whatever it is that they find to be most important. So I want to yield the floor to you and give you your ability to kind of, give us a close. So, floor is yours.
Well, thank you again for having me. It's such an honor, not only just to be here, but to serve the states of Florida, Minnesota, and DC as an attorney. Generational wealth is paramount, and I do everything I can to make sure that not only my clients are educated, but my students are fully educated moving forward. Uh, I take advantage of the great privilege that I have to be in my position by giving back to the community, holding a monthly estate planning clinic where I help clients or help people in the community understand more about their particular needs as an estate planning from the estate planning standpoint, and take on pro bono cases to fulfill the mission as an attorney here in Florida. And so again, I thank you so very much for having me and giving me the opportunity to speak more about this.
No, man, it's been my absolute pleasure. I really appreciate you being here. Estate planning and just legacy in general is something that's always been important to me because, as I kind of talked about earlier, we have such a culture that's driven by oral dictation and less through written means. So a lot of history is passed down through stories, orally told stories, and there's not a lot of true writings that help not just memorialize the past, memorialize what we think the future should look like. And so estate planning to me seems to be the answer and the solution to the problem of kind of making sure that the legacy from one generation is bequeathed to the next. And so it's always been an important topic. And I got to tell you, every time I have a lawyer that asks me, "Hey, do you know a lawyer that practices estate planning?" Or if I have a friend or family member say, "Do you know a lawyer that practices estate planning?" I have struggled identifying, and you know me, I know a lot of lawyers all throughout the nation, but I have struggled identifying high quality, high caliber individuals that practice in the estate planning world. So it's good to know you. It's good to have you in the Rolodex, and I certainly hope that everybody ultimately talks to you and talks to other people that they know that need to plan their estate. And like you said, if you have a penny to your name, just a penny, that's all it takes. So you got a penny to your name, you have an estate. And if you have an estate and people you love, you should plan for them. So again, I appreciate you being on the Final Focus. I'm glad that you're able to join us, and I look forward to having you again on in the future.
Thank you for having me.